Hey, Lord of the Rings fans, we are back with another episode. In fact, I'm feeling kind of good today. You know why? Because we this is our most famous guest we've ever had on this. You know what I'm saying? I feel like we're coming up in the world. We're doing some big things,
Wow.
you know what I'm saying, 2024. As always, I'm gonna leave the announcing of the guest to KaliCosplay. You know, our host with the most, the queen of the voices of Arda space. Kali, who do we have as a guest today on Voices of Arda?
So we are very excited and very honored to welcome Alan from the Prancing Pony Podcast, who most of you probably know. Hi, Alan.
Hello.
Alan,
It
sister,
was good to
yo,
see y'all. Good to see you
this
both.
is the epitome of like Lord of the Rings fame right here. This is that guy. Like I've been on his podcast. Yo, I felt like a celebrity when I was on his podcast. Like,
Did you?
Alan, appreciate you, my dude. Like,
Oh man, that was my privilege.
structure and form of how a podcast should be, and
Thank
like
you.
professionalism, like absolutely amazing knowledge. Like, this dude is, first of all, he's mad cool in real life. Like, I'm hyped right now. I'm hyped. You know what I'm saying? So I was
Thank you
like,
so much, man.
maybe I could get Alan to be on our podcast, our
Of
little humble
course.
podcast, which is just, a little, we just, hey, Callie, we doing a podcast today? Nah, I'm sick. I can't do it this week. But we get together and we do these things and we get to talk to wonderful guests like this. And I'm really excited to have you on here, man. So
Thanks.
thank you for being a guest on our podcast. You're awesome, and I love your license plate in the background. Tell us about your license plate real quick, because I'm
It says and Caligon. Of course, it doesn't fit that many characters, so it looks more like Anklegon, which I guess is appropriate because it is a manual transmission. But yeah, it's for my Mach 1, which is black, so it's very much like the great dragon of the sky, the greatest dragon who ever was. So
absolutely,
figured
man.
it was a good fit. Yeah.
That is amazing. That's awesome. Now, see, I aspire to get something cool like that. Alan, we want you to do one more thing for us. We want you to
Yeah.
let us know where you can be found on all your
Absolutely.
platforms.
There are all sorts of places I can be found these days. I mean, the Prancing Pony Podcast is the show that Sean and I started all the way back in 2016. We're just nearing the end of our 8th season, finishing up book 6 of The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Probably have 4 to 5 more years to go. Right now, it's me and a panel of rotating guest co-hosts, which knew better. You were one of them last season when we covered the Pyre of Denethor. It was so much fun.
It was definitely
So I've
fun.
been working with folks like Sarah Brown and James Tauber and Nerd of the Rings and Don Marshall. So next season, we're going to be going into the appendices, but you can find us at the Prancing Pony Podcast. That's at Prancing Pony Pod on Twitter, Instagram, the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook. I also do Today's Tolkien Times. That's at Tolkien Times everywhere you go. That's a short format daily show, video and podcast. And then the other project, which I have let languish for obvious reasons, is the Rings of Power wrap-up. That's going to be coming back this fall. That's something that I co-host with James Tauber and Sarah Brown, and we are really looking forward to coming back and talking about season 2 of Amazon's The Rings of Power when it comes out. So,
Yeah,
all of those places. And my book, Why We Love Middle Earth, that I co-wrote with Sean. So
yes, I actually got your book. Awesome.
Good.
What's the
All
joke
right,
here?
we are going to get into the topic of the episode, leading with a somewhat kind of maybe relevant joke, which is that the local wig shop got robbed last night. They had to replace all the locks.
Oh,
It was
But it
good.
makes
was good enough.
sense if you know that I was joking about wigs, because now we're going to talk about Rings of Power Season 2.
wow,
which is
that's a
coming
segue
up.
right there.
Huh? Yeah, we're gonna talk about basically not just Rings of Power season 2, but we're gonna talk about everything that we got coming up. Like, there is a plethora.
Yeah.
You want to know where I learned the word plethora? Let me just sidebar this for a second.
Okay.
I know you remember this movie back in the day. Alan. Remember
I'm sure
the
I
movie
do, 'cause
Three
I'm old,
Amigos?
Because which
Three
one?
Amigos?
Yeah.
Remember that movie?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's where I learned the word plethora.
Good
Yeah.
word.
Did you say there was a
Means a
plethora?
lot.
Yeah,
That is a good word. Yeah.
so there is a plethora of media coming out from the Lord of the
There is.
Rings universe. Like, it is a time to be a Lord of the Rings fan. It is a time. Like, it's fantastic. So we're going to be talking about Rings of Power season 2. We're going to be talking about a War of the Rohirrim. We're going to be talking about Tales of the Shire. Is the name Tales of the Shire, right?
Mhm.
Warner Brothers' new project they got coming out with Andy Serkis and Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
The hunt for
and
Gollum, like
more stuff still to come. I mean, we know that Embracer Group, the people who hold the rights to do the films, have already said they're going to be making more. I mean, that's their whole deal. They bought that license for a lot of money, and they want to recoup their
They should
investment.
use it. Yeah.
So
Yes, good.
they're going to be doing some adaptations along the way. So
all right. So let's start with Rings of Power season 2.
About 2 weeks ago, we finally got the trailer. We've
Yep.
been waiting for it for a very long time. We finally know when it's going to come out, which will be on August 29. I believe they are dropping the first 3 episodes and then an episode every week after that. So we will be watching them together. Right now on the Voices of Arda Discord, we're doing a rewatch of season 1 of Rings of Power in order to prepare for the new season. So we're doing them on Tuesday evenings, and then once the new season comes out, we'll also be watching them there together. And probably lots of your favorite Lord of the Rings groups will be doing watch parties for this, because it's a pretty big and fun deal.
Yeah,
It's really exciting to get new stuff.
That is
is
true.
exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. I mean, I know that there are going to be some folks who are a little, I don't know, trepidatious. I know my optimism level is high. It's just not as high as it was at this point before series 1. You know, I'm a little more tempered in terms of expectations, but I am still optimistic and hoping they can write themselves out of some of the holes I thought they dug for themselves.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear
season.
you. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
There's people who hate the show just to hate it. There's people who gave the show a chance. They like it, but they think, hey, it definitely could be better. There's some issues. They wrote themselves into some corners. And then there's people who just like, you know what? I'm happy to have some Lord of the Rings content. It is what it is. Thank you. You know
and
what I'm
there's
saying?
room in the fandom for all of those.
For all of them.
Just to be real clear. Yeah.
So what did you think of the trailer? Let's get into that. What did you think of the trailer?
Ooh. There were some elements in the trailer that, and I may be combining in my head the trailer as well as the 2-minute behind the scenes video that they released shortly thereafter. So if I reference something that was in the second one and not in the trailer,
you could do both.
Forgive me.
No problem.
There were some little tidbits and story elements that were hinted at that I thought were intriguing. The idea of it looked like Theo was crying in one of those shots, and there was something the actor who plays Arondir was talking about, his character being dealt a blow, and I'm thinking, okay, Bronwyn's dead. I mean, that's my first thought is Bronwyn's not going to be with us in season 2, which is a shame. She was fantastic. I thought the actress who plays her was just over the top good, and I really enjoyed her on screen. But I know that the actress has also said that she wants to focus more on her activism for women in Iran. So nothing but respect to her for that. So I think that's one story element. I'd be interested to see how they deal with that. There were a couple of other things that looked really good. I was impressed with Elrond in the armor as he was fighting. That shot was really something.
Yeah, I like that as well.
The idea, of course, of Anatar. I mean, he's not named that yet. I don't know if they're going to have the rights to use that name since that's not in the appendices. But the idea of Sauron as, the Lord of Gifts coming back and seducing Celebrimbor and, making more rings, that's going to be intriguing. The idea of Sauron with just a wig, don't, hello, fellow youths.
If we can say, okay, Christopher Reeves, you got that I refuse to have people berate this wig. If you can say Superman and Clark Kent are two different people, then cut it out.
That's true. And they cut it out. They could go with this too.
It's like, stop it.
It could be that's how we see him.
Exactly.
But that the other characters see him differently. That may be a way. I don't know how they're going to deal with it. It may be that he talks to different characters, that Galadriel never sees him, for instance, because I think she'd probably spot him right quick. I'm interested in seeing the return of Celeborn. At least I'm assuming he's coming back this season, and that's one of the things that we've not been seen in the teaser.
Well, he's casted, so he should be there.
He'll be there, but in what capacity, how much screen time, how much role? That'll be interesting to see. But it does appear that they are tightening things up a little bit. They're bringing some of the disparate storylines together so that there are fewer storylines to tell. And I think that will help the show's coherency. I think it'll help its flow. Yeah, and maybe it'll give it a chance to sort of ignore some of the weaker spots and just
Yeah.
focus on the strengths, because there were some amazing strengths. I want to see much, much more of the Elrond, Durin, Disa storyline. That was one of the strongest elements of season one, and I'm hoping to see plenty of that.
I'm looking forward to seeing Narvi. Like, I
Yes,
think we need
yes,
to Elrond, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Elrond and Durin. I loved it.
yeah,
But let's not kid ourselves. It's Celebrimbor and Narvi who we should be focusing on. I
yeah,
think that was an introduction to the start of a friendship, and then we build from there. And this is okay. Now the dwarves are
yeah,
coming to Aragon, and boom, that relationship
exactly.
gives birth to other relationships
I
and
agree.
they're important to the rings,
Yeah,
which
I
that's
think
what
so.
I'm looking forward to seeing more.
Mhm.
And what I was thought was important from season one, which a lot of people probably didn't realize, the Elrond and the dwarves also come to help Aragon, and
Mm,
I think that's important. Now
yeah,
the dwarves end up having to shut themselves in House of Doom. And
mhm,
Elrond ends up not to no avail. Aragon is,
yeah.
we know Aragon doesn't make it. Hopefully, we
Celebrimbor,
get to
yeah.
see the founding of Rivendell, possibly, or something like that.
Maybe
But
I'd like to see that, but the whole thing is the timeline is already very
Mm.
it's sort of the timeline's more of a guideline than actual rules. There's no there's clearly an approach to the timeline that isn't really looking at the tale of years in any way, shape, or form.
yeah,
I mean, it's not just compression, but sort of mixing and matching. And so I don't expect to see things happen in anything resembling the order that we might be familiar with. I mean, just think about the rings themselves, right?
Okay.
We know that Celebrimbor made the three, yes, using Sauron's sort of the knowledge that he gained from Sauron, but well after the 16 were originally made. And then the one was made after that.
after that, yeah.
And so, this idea that the three were made first
I
is,
I had a huge problem with that.
yeah, I did too.
I had a
But,
huge
you
problem
know,
with that. That's one of my biggest pet peeves with
yeah,
the first season.
yeah,
For whatever the reasoning was for that, I'm telling myself, all right, get over it. They're making these rings the
hmm
way they want to make the rings, but I do have hypotheses on
yeah,
timeline stuff.
exactly.
So one of my thoughts was there's no minister. So
Right.
there's nobody to come bully Sauron when he destroys Aragon and goes to war with the elves. There's nobody to come help. They're going to have to use Pharazôn to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking they're just combining those events,
Yeah.
and that makes sense timeline wise, to me. So that's
Mhm.
my thought process there.
Yeah, I think
I
you're right.
think
I
they
mean, they
can.
have to. Pharazôn's the last leader of
Yeah,
Numenor,
he's
so
the
it's not like
last.
he's going
Like,
to have a successor. And we all know what happens there. So my guess is that they will use him in the same role as Numenor served in that time period in the books,
yeah,
where Numenor comes to the rescue and basically, becomes the dominant force. So I think they're going to combine their victory in Eregion, or their assistance in Eregion, with the expansion of the Empire of Numenor. And so we'll start to see, I hope we at least start to see some of that Numenor becoming an empire in a bad sense, right? Exploiting the natural resources, dominating the local, indigenous cultures, and becoming a force that's not a positive.
yeah,
And if we can see that happen simultaneous with Pharazôn's kind of descent into this lust for immortality, I think that'll be well played, but
yeah.
we'll have to see how it goes. But yeah, it's not like he's going to have another king after him. So
Exactly. So I worry about that,
yeah,
getting all
yeah,
those elements
yeah,
in a timely fashion to where it makes sense, because there are so many things that
there
happen,
really are.
and I was very disappointed in the Numenor aspect of how Numenor, not how it looked
Oh no, it's
amazing,
fantastic. Yeah,
but they just didn't have a standing army. They weren't, they
yeah,
seemed naive to the world in a very certain sense.
yeah,
They weren't traveling like that. They were seafaring people, but it seemed like they were more seafaring in the sense of, hey, let's go catch some fish. Like they
Yeah,
yeah,
they
weren't
seem
yeah,
sheltered.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
seem very sheltered. I was like, what is happening,
It
bro?
was very weird because we were seeing Pharazôn and we're seeing him talk about the threat that the elves present, and in terms of Galadriel's presence there on the island. And yet at the same time, it feels like we're looking at very early Numenor in terms of their
Yeah,
culture,
yeah,
because they're not
Yeah.
expansionist yet. They haven't,
yeah.
there's been no Eldarian to establish, a haven on the shores of Middle Earth and to start to
Yeah.
deforest, the region there between Gondor and Arnor.
Yeah.
There's been no connection with Lindon, as there is in the actual written storyline. So we'll see how they play along with that. Compression is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they had no choice because otherwise this would be a 20-year television series, and they'd have to
Not
replace the
true.
human
I
cast.
I hold to the I hold
No,
they
I
could have
know.
done it.
They could have done it. They could have
I
done it.
hold they could have done it.
They could
They're
have done it. I know.
scared to do things. And
Yeah.
just in general in film today.
Mhm.
They're
I
like,
think you're
hey,
right.
there's a script we got to stick to, and we got to stick. They do this too often, where I think you could pull it off. It's just you're scared to pull it off because you're following these rules that you made for yourself,
Yeah.
and this is 2024. Those things don't even
Yeah, you
apply
built a box.
necessarily anymore.
You've built a box, and you
Yeah.
think that you need to stay in this formula. And maybe there's some evidence to suggest that that's the only way they're going to be financially viable. And let's be honest, they have to be financially viable. I mean, Bezos spent $250 million on the rights alone,
Yeah.
and production costs of season 1 were closing in on 750, 800 million, from what I understand. So we're already talking about $1 billion into this.
Yeah.
And granted, production costs will be a little lower going forward because a lot of those production costs are sunk costs that will be recouped over the next 4 seasons.
Yeah.
But we're still talking about, over the course of 5 years, we're talking about an investment of over $2 billion.
Yeah, playing it safe, which I understand, but
Yeah,
I
they gotta
don't
make
know. I
money.
just
So, but I'm with you because you're right. If they'd gotten a little more creative with certain things and not
Yeah.
locked themselves into some of the sort of commercially viable things like the mystery box, which I thought was the weakest part of season 1, the whole idea of, play the guessing game of who Sauron is,
Yeah, it's like,
and play
we
the
know who
guessing
he is.
game of who, stop with that, focus instead on the story, on the characters, on the places and events, and don't worry about leaving us in suspense. I think if they'd gone that route, and then, like you said, not be afraid to do things like season 2 starts 500 years after season 1, and we have an entirely new cast of humans. Do that.
They're still worried about these humans.
Yeah.
This is one of the great things I love about having my own podcast. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody gives a shit about these humans. Certain ones you don't know enough about them to care. Like you Minister, you don't learn about Minister. You just learn, hey, he gives aid to Gilgalad. So we can say at this time, this is the whatever king. You can put in the screen, you write Mordor on the screen. So you could write 3rd king of Numenor, 10th king of Numenor, 12th king of Numenor. Not that you should even get involved with all those kings. You could have an old man during a certain era tell a backstory of how now the Numenorians think this.
Flashbacks.
And it's a quick thing. And go about your business and boom. And you get to certain kings that are important. And you just say, boom, Palantir.
Exactly.
Pharazôn.
You have some time on Eldari, and you have some time on Tar Palantir. You have some time with each of these kings who represent different turning points in the history of Numenor. Yeah.
I would have done things a lot different. I would have had Elrond be an anchor and be the star instead of Galadriel. It makes sense. His brother is the first ruling king of Numenor. He's the one that ties everything together. It would have
been good to see Elros in the first episode or two.
Exactly.
So
like
good.
The establishment of Numenor. Yeah.
Numenor, and then this many years, and then Galadriel saying, you guys fell off, or whoever was there, if that's who you picked. Hey, you guys are not how you used to be when, or Elrond even be like, hey, you guys aren't like when my brother ruled, he was da da da. It's I don't think it's that hard. And they
It takes chances, and then of course, it probably on a practical sense, it is a little harder to retain or to get quality cast if they know they're only going to be on the show for 8 episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a shame if we only saw some of these cast members for 8 episodes.
But House of the Dragon pulled it off.
Yeah. No, there's no doubt
Even
that
though
it can
they
be
play
done.
the same character, it's 3 different people. You know what I'm saying? And it was 2 episodes each, or 3. You know what I mean? And it worked. So you can do it.
Or it could go like Foundation did and have the same actor playing different iterations of the same character. Lee Pace, who's like 5 different Cleons. But that's a whole other story.
But overall, I really am excited. So I know I'm just, I was talking my smack, but I actually am really excited. This seems a very Sauron-centric season.
Yes.
I think we're going to get a lot of history with him and Adar as far as what they're going through. I think we're
Yeah.
going to get we're going to see what him and Celebrimbor are going through, and
I hope so.
Celebrimbor looks beat up. He looks
Yeah,
beat
he
up.
does. He
So
does.
he's going through it. So we are going to get that Aragon thing. And the way Sauron's smiling when he's walking through, and there's panic and there's chaos in Aragon and probably in Austin Ethel. I'm not sure if they could be named, but yes, that's what I want to see. Like he's like, yeah, got him. You know what I'm saying? I would love to see some more Gilgalad, see where his head is at and what his plan is. Didn't really see him in the trailer like that, except for when I saw the 3 rings. Círdan, we saw his hand. It has to be Círdan.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. What did you think about the scene where we're hearing whispers, and I'm a person that said, hey, I see burrow whites in the background of this foggy. I see those eyes. Those are burrow whites to me, bro. Like those beady eyes in the background are like ghostly. I'm like, what's going on here?
There could be
Where
any
are
sort
they?
of, but yeah, I mean, I think at least we'll be building into that, sort of maybe laying a backstory for the possibility of whites, or it could be even a prelude to the Nine, some sort of a stretched, not quite dead but no longer living human under the influence of one of the Nine. So I don't know where they're going. It could also just be a nightmare that somebody has. I mean, that's the crazy thing about these trailers. They are, and I remember saying this last year, 2 years ago. I remember saying this before season 1. Trailers are intentionally cut to deceive. They are trying to trick you with every edit of these things. So, it's one of these deals where, as a prime example, I see that very brief cut of Pharazôn standing in front of the eagle. I know that everybody seems to be thinking, oh, now they're going to fly the eagles and stuff. No, 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 no,
Oh,
no, 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 don't go there.
I think
We don't know
Pharazôn's
that.
talking crazy to the eagle.
Yeah, exactly. The other option is that he's going to kill the eagle right
Kill
then
the
and
eagle,
there,
yeah.
which is more possible, but let's just put that under very bad ideas for 500.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole point is they're trying to get you to think one thing, and they're going to flip a 180, and it's going to be something entirely different.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Just before we move on to the next topic,
Yeah.
I want to touch on now, and this is a theory that I've held since the first season. So we saw Theo, and he was crying, like you said.
Yeah.
We saw Rondir talking about, loss. And if Bronwyn goes, Theo, I already think he's going to be the Witch King, and that's going to give motivation for him becoming the Witch King. I just want you to know my theories. I'm in the 90%, I'm in the 90 range of being right with my theories. Like
I'm not shocked
we
by
save
that.
this clip
I remember
for after when you're right. Yeah. Okay.
I remember thinking that actually early on when we see him, fiddling around with that sword that they found in the barn. I thought, okay, this is a build up. He's going to end up being a bad guy at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think he's being built up to be the Witch King, or at least to be some other.
Somebody's like, he's going to be the King of the Dead, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
I originally thought that might be Halbrand. I know I was thinking if Halbrand, before he was revealed as Sauron, because I thought it's too obvious that he's Sauron, so he's clearly not Sauron. I was wrong. I was thinking too complex.
We all did that, yeah.
Nope. I said Halbrand
so
from the first
obvious.
second.
I thought, how could it possibly be him? So, but I thought that maybe he would end up saying, "Okay, Galadriel, okay, Elendil, I'll fight with you guys," and then he would bail, and he'd end up being the king of the army of the dead. But I certainly never thought Theo was going to that role.
Because I'm like, he's not from where he needs to be from for that to happen. I'm probably taking it too literally. We're knowing that they're doing so many different changes. So that's why I'm just like, nope, impossible. Even though they're making Mithril come from a tree.
Oh,
I
my
should
goodness.
just stop.
That's one of those writing holes that they dug themselves into. I don't even want to touch that one with a Gil-galad's staff. No. Oh, man. Don't get me started on that one.
I don't want to get started on it, but all in all, I'm still excited. I'm very excited for season 2. I can't wait to give my reviews. I can't wait to talk to you about what they end up doing let's go back and touch on and see,
Yeah.
what our thoughts, came to fruition, our
Yeah.
guesses, and I love the Muriel in the sea, and I
Hmm.
think that's a dream, and she's with the
Mm.
Yeah.
gigantic sea monster. I think that's like during the
Yeah.
fall. I saw like debris in the water.
We
I
saw her
think,
had a dream, we saw her have a dream last season
yeah,
that was pretty
Right.
significant with the wave. So that wouldn't surprise me in the least to
yeah,
have her be, having another vision. Yeah, it's there's some things I'd probably put myself more in the cautiously optimistic camp.
cautiously, and it
Last time
makes
around
sense.
at this point, I was very optimistic, and then I think now once burned, twice shy. So I'm a
Mm.
little bit less optimistic, but I am hopeful
Yeah,
because as
let's be honest.
always, more Middle Earth, is let's be honest, even a C minus show, and I think I may have given it a C plus overall because of the other elements. The writing was, I may have given it a pretty poor grade, but when you think about casting, cinematography, score, set
Yeah,
design,
Mm.
costumes, everything else was very, very good, B plus or higher. Um, but yeah, I mean, even a C or C minus show is still Middle Earth and gives us something to talk about, gives us something to think about, and serves as maybe inspiration for future people doing adaptations to do better.
yeah,
To find ways to improve. And really, we're going to be seeing adaptations a lot more over the next 20 years or so. While the license is still a viable thing, because eventually, of course, The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, that is to say the works written during Tolkien's lifetime, will go into public domain. And so that's when the license stops being a profitable thing. And that's only about 20 years away. So,
mm,
yeah,
yeah. So,
20,
whew,
20, a little bit, let's see, because it's life of the author plus 70 years. And then it's January 1st
Oh.
of the year after that. So he passed away in 1973. So we're talking about 2043. So we're talking about January 1st, 2044. So yeah, a little less than 20 years
whew,
if the law doesn't change or if they don't find some other way.
they'll
And
find a
obviously
way.
that doesn't cover the Silmarillion. It doesn't cover any of the history of Middle Earth
Uh,
because all of those are Christopher Tolkien's works, and that will all long be gone.
Oh.
So
so thank you so much for talking to me about Rings of Power.
yeah.
I know Callie has a ton of other topics for us to discuss.
All
Callie,
right.
what is next on the dartboard?
Next, chronologically anyway, is something a little bit different, which will be fun. It's called War of the Rohirrim, coming out on
Yes.
December 13th, directed by Kenji Kamiyama, and it's going to be an anime style.
Yeah. I'm super excited about
I'm a,
this.
su- I'm super excited, but just the art style in itself is
Yeah.
going to, like, anime is really, first of all, just taking over, and it is huge. So that art style with what they're able to do story wise,
Yeah. It's animation is such a flexible medium.
yeah,
And to tell the story this way, I mean, obviously the story is the thing, right? But I'm fairly confident there because we know Philippa Boyens has served as the lore consultant for the story. So I think that gives me reason to hope in terms of, faithfulness to the text.
yeah,
Then when we add in the flexibility and power of anime and a great score along with it, I think it opens up the door for more animated films to tell stories that might not be practical to tell with, flesh and blood actors.
yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
a lot of people felt that way about, whenever we discuss possibly, which, time will tell, doing a Silmarillion
Right.
adaptation.
Oh
It's like,
yeah.
Mhm.
how would you do that live action? It's like, yo, just do an
Yeah.
anime style.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would be
because
awesome. Imagine
scaling
those
is a
first stage
problem.
stories.
Yeah,
Scaling is
like
a
we've said,
problem,
like
right?
everything is so big. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so impossible to show that
Yeah,
Yeah.
with live
how do
action
you
on
do
a
the Iron and
screen.
Lindley in actuality? Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. So I wanted to jump in here because whenever we talk about the War of the Rohirrim,
Hmm.
me and Lee, who's Silmarillion, we kind of are a little worried with what I believe they're going to do with this story of Helm. I don't find Helm to be a good person at all.
No, no. He's a
And
little bit of a hothead, isn't he?
he's a hothead, and there we're in a bit of a situation where the Rohirrim aren't necessarily like 100% right. You
No,
know?
and I think it's a reminder that they're middlemen, right? I mean, they're
Yeah,
not of the Edain. And while they are above the low men, they're certainly above the Dunlendings and others. They are still not. And again, this is where the breakdown, the connections to the primary world break down, because humans are humans.
Yeah.
But in Middle Earth, there's very clear distinctions between the Edain, the middlemen, and the low men.
Mhm.
And yes, through generations of intermarriage and mixing family lines, obviously, we get some of each. But there's a huge difference between, no matter how good we think Éomer is, there's a huge difference between Aragorn and Éomer.
Mhm.
And no matter how much we think of somebody like Bard, there's a huge difference between Éomer and Bard.
Yeah.
Because you're going from Edain to middle to low.
Yeah, they're
So-
like descended from the pre-Edain. Like, even
Yeah,
though
yeah.
technically they're descended from the same
They are.
people,
Yeah.
it's like
They're
you
kin
didn't
from
get
afar,
blessed.
I
You
believe the
didn't-
story
you
tells
didn't-
us. Yeah,
you didn't go through this fire. You didn't go through this process, like this purification process, kind of.
exactly.
Like, you didn't get uplifted, kind of. It's kind
Yeah.
of similar to like the elves who didn't
That's
go
exactly
over.
what I'm thinking. It's that split with the, they're not necessarily Avari, but
Yeah.
I mean, but they're still not those who've seen the light, right?
Less
They're
wise
still
and
those
more
who got
dangerous.
stuck on the way.
less wise and more dangerous. So I'm just worried that they're going to play this.
Yeah.
Oh, the Rohirrim are the heroes, and I don't think that makes for an interesting story. I think it makes for, hey, the Dunlendings definitely aren't the good guys, but understanding why they're doing what they're doing
Right.
is
Yeah.
important. You
It
know
is
what I'm saying?
important, and
Where-
it's something that Tolkien recognized in his own works. If you read some of this, the tales that are included in the history of Middle Earth, you
Yeah.
see that there's a story at the very end, and the name escapes me at the moment, but where we actually get a story told from the viewpoint of some of these native people dealing with the invasion of the Númenóreans, and
Yeah.
it really reveals Tolkien's positions on this in terms of imperialism and all of that, and colonialism. But it's a very small story that most people have never read, and it's killing me that I can't remember it. But I do hope that we see the Dunlendings, doing the wrong thing, but also having been victimized in a way because their land has just been given away.
Yeah, this is here. This is your.
There,
Hey,
Kalanarthon, it's empty, and the Dunlendings.
it's
Wait a
empty.
minute.
They're like, hey, this corner. We're not in with the whole thing, but this corner, near the Gap of Rohan, is like, hey, you're stepping on some toes here, guy. You
Yeah,
know?
a little bit.
I just think it's funny. And
Yeah.
this was really brave of Tolkien that I find. And Callie,
Mhm.
you can tell me if you agree. When we read the chapter where the Rohirrim are, they're riding on their way to Gondor, and then obviously they run into Gonburigan, and they are talking to the Druidine, and the Druidine are like, hey, let's make this pact of, hey, we show you this way. We want you to stop killing us. That is the
Please.
conditions
Yeah.
of
It's
the.
not asking a lot.
That's
He's
a low
like, yes,
bar.
just
Yeah.
hey, just leave us alone. Stop killing us.
Yeah, don't
You
treat
look
us
at
like
the
animals.
Rohirrim
Right.
differently. You're like, you're killing these guys? That's what I thought. I always was like,
Historically, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
not
thing. I don't
them.
think.
Historically, I know what you mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I looked. I was like, wow, y'all kind of like that's
Mhm.
wild that you're doing
Yeah.
that. I always
Well,
looked
and
at
it
like
sort
that.
of echoes, in a way, it echoes the way the elves initially saw the petty
The
dwarves.
petty dwarves.
They thought they were creatures to hunt and not fellow sentient beings. But I can see sort of the expansionist Númenóreans not caring whether they're people, and then certainly as generations moved forward, the memory of the Druidine is gone. And
Yeah.
there's no recollection of them as people. And so you encounter them in the woods, and they're shooting poison darts at you, and they're uncivilized, and they're wearing, primitive clothing, and you can't recognize their sounds as anything approaching a language. And so you end up killing them, justifying it because they're lesser than, which, like you said, that was brave for Tolkien to talk about that in that way, to criticize that approach. There's no question that in describing it, he fell into some of the tropes, literarily speaking, that we see. Certainly the noble savage trope with the Druidine is definitely a thing. But he definitely spoke up for the proper treatment of these people, these sentient beings, also children of Iluvatar.
Yeah.
And at the
Like,
end of The Lord of the Rings, doesn't Aragorn give the forest back?
He
Yeah.
gives the forest back and says that men aren't even allowed in. It's the same thing that he does in the Shire,
Does in the Shire,
where it's why when he does eventually go to the Shire, he won't even cross the bridge.
He
meets
won't
them
go
at the
himself.
bridge. Yeah,
That
yeah.
is key right there.
It
I
is.
love how even though we're talking about the Rohirrim and I love how in Dunharrow and they don't destroy the statues of the Pupil men.
No.
And I'm like, I feel that makes me feel like a little reverence is there, like a little mystery, a little like, hey, this is some ancient, we don't want to mess with this, and have respect for this culture in a certain sense. Where I understand that, hey, these wild men are, hey, let's protect ourselves, or let's feel what we got to do, but at the same time, they have enough reverence and understanding. Hey, this is culturally important,
Or
so
just
leave this
fear.
here.
Or just
that,
fear and superstition,
which is a lot of it is fear too,
which is powerful. Yeah, I mean, especially when you consider that the Pukkelmen were on the road that led up to the only place that you would go if you were going to go in the paths of the dead, where
you
where
better leave us alone.
Yeah, where that one guy went, hapless. Was it Brago?
Yeah, I think it was Brago. He's the freaking son of the.
He was the son of the king.
Second?
He was the son of the king who built Medjugorje.
Yeah, so he's the second. He's the son of the second king.
Yeah, son of the second king. He would have been the third king had he not been.
Yeah,
stupid.
and his freaking bones are still. That to this day, that gives me chills.
I know. Well, and when you dig deeper and you read stuff about how Tolkien at one point envisioned that story as him trying to find a way out, and it wasn't just like, he just died of starvation or thirst or whatever. His enemies broke his legs so that he couldn't escape. Like, they didn't break his neck, they didn't kill him, they just broke his legs and left him to lay there and die.
Yeah, man.
Which is just terrifying. And the thought that those might have been ghosts that did that, which that's always the question. Like, were those living enemies? Were they the undead? We don't know.
I always
the army of the dead would have had the ability to interact physically, or was fear their only weapon? That's a whole nother, that's speculation stuff, but it's fun.
So what do you think about the voice acting?
I haven't actually listened to any of the examples yet. I'm excited for it because as a voice actor myself, I'm jealous, but I always find that craft to be, that's not the kind of work I do. I do documentary, nonfiction, narrative stuff, so that's well beyond my scope of ability. So for me, it's just admiration. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah.
And so I want to actually not hear it until I'm in the theater hearing it properly.
Yeah, we got some heavy hitters on there. I think
we have some very heavy hitters, and I do love that they're grounding it by using Miranda Otto.
I was going to say Miranda Otto.
Telling the story as a flashback. I think that will work very well for
and that was a beautiful move on their behalf.
Very smart.
And so I'm excited. I'm most excited within the story. Two things I want to see. I want to see, just obviously everybody wants to see Helm going out at night and smashing Dunlendings.
I want to see him, one punch. I want to see his one punch knock that guy down, man.
Yeah, Freka, he
step outside, boom,
just punches Freka for no reason. Really, Freka didn't do. That was so wild. Freka really didn't do that.
He's a hothead, man. Helm is a hothead.
I'm like, dude, when people hear this story, do they know Freka didn't really do anything? He kind of just
didn't do anything worthy of death.
Yeah, not death. Like, it was like he suggested something. The king called him out his name, and he's like, "Hey, you kind of yourself." And then the king just punches him to death. What?
One punch doom.
One punch Helm.
Yeah.
But also the Corsairs' involvement.
Yeah.
I really want to see, because they come help Wolf, and like the enemies of Gondor, like kind of coalesced and come together, and they're like, these guys.
Of course, because they know that Rohan is an ally of Gondor. So anytime they can weaken the northern borders of Gondor, they're going to take advantage of that. Yeah,
I think a lot of people who just casually watch The Lord of the Rings do not realize that Isengard is a satellite. Is literally a satellite protection place of western and northern borders of Gondor, and that is the whole point of the Gap of Rohan. That is the entry point into that land, and that's why whoever has the wizard's veil there, you
Mhm.
know, Isengard is like that's a protective point. So we
Yeah.
have the Isengard there, and then on the other end where Aglanos is where you have Helm's Deep. So
Right.
literally, like it's like, hey, this is where we fight.
Yeah.
You got the
Yeah,
fords
the
of Isen.
geography dictates where the battle
Geography
takes
wise,
place.
it
Yeah.
is it's actually hard to get through there, even though it's not mountainous. We got the fords of Isen. We have a
Mhm.
protective forts on both ends of
Mhm.
that. That's why in the Fellowship of the Ring, they're like, hey, let's go through the Gap of Rohan. We can't. Brings
Yeah.
us too close to Isengard. We don't know what's going on with the Rohirrim. We just can't do it. We can't go that way. A lot of people just when they look at the map, and I answered this question actually yesterday. Somebody
Mhm.
asked why didn't they sail all around, and I was like, hey, this is why they couldn't go each place. They
Yeah.
actually covered this magnificently.
Yeah.
And Boromir's like, why don't we just do this? What are you talking about? Like,
Yeah, why don't we
and they're
turn it
like,
into a nice long road trip? We'll stop at we'll pick up some snacks on the way. No, it's too long. You
too
can't go
long.
that.
We don't know what's going
No.
on in those lands.
No.
It's no, it doesn't. It's and then they would have ran smack into the Corsairs of Umbar at one
Oh
point.
yeah, yeah, absolutely would have.
So I love that so we're gonna see that, and I wonder if they're gonna give us any hints on who the Corsairs are, because I know in the movies we just
are they going to
hear
give us like the backstory of how the Corsairs came to be enemies of Gondor? Maybe
just
some of the
just make
Gondorian
it, hey,
Civil
this is why we're
War.
beefing with Gondor. Let's help Wolf.
That'll be interesting. That might be bigger than the scope of that film. I do have to say, I would love to see.
Yeah.
I would love to see a film on the Gondorian Civil War and sort of that whole era of allying with the Northmen before they were Kalinar, or before they were the Rohirrim. Heck, before they were even the Eotheod, right? I mean, when they partnered up then. And then the usurper, Castamir the usurper, and all of that. That would be a heck of a storyline. But yeah,
I have a question. I have a question for you. Now, this is a question I asked all Tolkien scholars, and I want to see.
Then you might want to ask somebody else. I'm a Tolkien podcaster.
You know. All right.
All right.
This is a question, and it's because I have this thought in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Aragorn is the heir. We know his heir. His claim is strengthened because he's from the house of Isildur and Anari.
Right.
So his claim is undeniable.
Yeah. We
know Eonor is the last king of Gondor. He was a cousin, but he's still from the line. Now, being that Eonor was taken, and before Aragorn, would the Corsairs of Umbar have the closest claim to kingship if their line was unbroken to the throne? They could argue that they are direct descendants of Anarion.
But if Arvedwi's claim was denied, then certainly their claim would be denied. I mean, like their claim is weaker than Arvedwi's was. Arvedwi's claim was actually pretty strong. They just didn't want him.
Was valid. Arvedwi's claim was valid, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So like
if they denied that, they would deny that certainly that claim. And we just continue to see steward rule.
Now, my point is to this: it's not whether their claim would be accepted or not, but would you consider their claim would be strong as long as as
the line is unbroken. I'd have to remind myself. I'd have to look at the genealogies. I'd have to look at the line.
Castamir's sons are the ones who start the Corsairs of Umbar. They flee to Umbar, and Castamir is valid.
He is valid.
He's valid. True. He's the descendant of. He is he goes about it the wrong way.
And he definitely goes about it.
He's a usurper, but even his argument was even valid. You know what I'm saying? He has a point. This is why he had a backing at first. He has a valid point. He's more pure blood than the king was actually. And it's like it's just he's a usurper. He was a jerk. The
whole Northman problem.
Which is this is a touchy thing. It's like, is it a problem? But to them, trying to preserve their bloodline and the purity of it, Castamir is more pure.
The only problem is I doubt that they would be able to show a purity all the way down, because who would those people have intermarried with? They wouldn't have intermarried with Númenorian, with descendants of Númenor.
Why not? Umbar is a Númenorian settlement. So just like
Yeah, but of royal descent. I mean, I think that's the problem. You're going to be
No,
looking at
I don't think it's royal descent.
shorter lifespans, and I don't know if they could prove the claim. It would be something that you'd have to consider because of the way the kingship works.
Yeah,
Uh, but it certainly would not have superseded Aragorn's claim.
absolutely not. No.
I think at the end of the day, in a practical sense, the stewards would have, the ruling council would have said no, and we would have
Of
continued
course.
under stewardship, with Faramir. Um,
In my
ruling as
head,
the steward.
this is how it would go. And I know it's a super tangent, but in my head, they would come beefing with Gondor but screaming the rightful claim. And
Yeah.
Many times we see stuff like where you shout loud enough, people in the crowd are like, well, he's there.
Somebody, yeah.
Hey,
Well, and
they're not lying. Maybe this is why
speaking of
they've been beefing this whole time.
adaptations, speaking of adaptations, I don't know if either of you play Lord of the Rings online, but the new epic storyline that takes place in Umbar is there's some similarities with what you're suggesting here, which is that the descendants of Castamere are creating a bit of an uprising in Gondor itself against Aragorn as not being the right lineage, and that instead it should be Castamere's descendants. So it's an interesting storyline, and that's what I'm trying to say is I like the storyline as an idea. I don't think in practicality it would go anywhere, but yeah.
Well, I just
That's a
always
great
found it
tangent, though.
interesting. So
And Callie, you're very patient to have allowed us to go down that tangent. I know we've got more to talk about.
Yeah, all right. So Lord of the Rohirrim, which we just talked about, will happen 183 years before the original trilogy stuff.
Mhm. about
But
right.
now we are going to have another one that's been announced, The Lord of the Rings: The Hunt for Gollum, which will happen more just before the original
Right.
trilogy stuff, right? So we don't have a trailer. We don't really have much yet
No,
for
we don't have anything
this,
other than just
but
the press
please,
release.
but what are our preliminary thoughts?
I'm excited, but I'm also a little bit like, why did they choose Gollum? I feel like
I mean, if
there's
you
so
ask
many
with
other
your
good
wallet, I
stories.
think you'll find the answer.
Yeah, I mean, it may just be that they really wanted Andy Serkis to be involved, and that was sort of his price. I think he's going to be a phenomenal director. I think it's going to be a well-made film. The question is whether it's a story we all are really interested in.
yeah, I can't get a spark from it.
Yeah.
I'm certain storylines I've been very vocal that I just don't care. And it's no offense. I just don't want to see young Aragorn. I don't want to see the hunt for Gollum. And I like Gollum, and I think Gollum is well traveled and
Oh yeah,
and I think he's
fascinating character, and
fascinating
Serkis
everything.
portrays him brilliantly.
I just don't see it there. I want to see either the war in the north or the war with Angmar. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I would have been
just-
okay with young Aragorn, not so much child Aragorn, but
Yeah.
his missions of errantry, right? When he goes out and ends up fighting as Thorondor in Gondor
Mhm.
and in Rohan with Theoden's grandfather. I mean, those would have been some amazing things to see.
I know.
Like to see
I
him
would
going to
love
Umbar.
meet Ecthelion II.
Yeah,
See the
yeah, yeah.
dynamic between Aragorn and Denethor. They're
Yeah.
a year apart in age, by the way, in case you guys didn't
Yeah.
realize. I
Yeah.
think Denethor is a year older,
I
or
think
is it
so.
Aragorn?
I'd have to double check, but they are
And
very similarly aged.
you'll get a lot of insight into why Denethor treats his sons the way he do, because Ecthelion was more partial to Aragorn.
Yeah.
But Denethor was no walk in the park. He was very
No.
strong, and it's an interesting story.
But yeah, he was very jealous of Thorondor.
very
Yeah.
jealous, very
Yeah.
jealous, and
That would have been a fantastic storyline to
Fantastic right
explore.
there.
But if there's anybody in the world that's going to be able to pull this off, though, it's going to be Jackson, Boyens, Walsh, Serkis, et al. Especially if they're able to bring back not so much the cast, but obviously the teams, the people like Richard Taylor at Weta, Howard Shore to do the music. If they can bring back, I mean, sadly they won't be able to have Andrew Lesney as their cinematographer anymore. He passed away a few years ago. He was brilliant. But if they're able to bring back some of those people that were involved in the making of particularly the first three, the Lord of the Rings films, then I think they could make it a really compelling film. But like you said, it's just a story that I'm a lot less like super
What do we even
interesting.
have to work with? I mean, in terms of
I mean, personally, I think the landscapes are probably your most interesting things.
Well, yeah, I mean, and Tolkien would tell you the same.
Like
The landscape is a character in Middle Earth. That's the
yeah,
thing to remember.
Yeah,
right.
So I think if we include that in the story, that could be a good one. But there are a lot of little tangential things in Aragorn's hunt for Gollum that they could include. So we could get Lorien earlier on. We could
Mhm.
get Thranduil. Now, whether it's
I was
going
about
to
to
be
say
Lee Pace
Mirkwood.
or not, I don't know what they're going to do there. We could get obviously a younger Legolas, though only slightly younger because he's so flippin' old in the first place. We can get a lot of these characters and places that we're familiar with. I mean, if he's hunting him through Mirkwood, we're going to see the influence of Dol Guldur again. We're going to get a lot of tangential stories that could be interesting or could be made to be interesting, especially filling in the blanks because the appendix doesn't tell us a ton of detail about the hunt. And I think that might be what appeals to them. They're
Yeah.
seeing that, okay, here we don't have to stick to a script per se. We can fill in the blanks and make it interesting for people and tell stories that are connected, but not directly explicitly connected in the text.
Yeah, I think a couple of interesting things they can do is they can jump on some things that people have played with and hey, what was Gollum doing? Where
Right.
was Gollum sneaking in windows and robbing
Oh,
cradles
yeah,
and
yeah. Was he
things like
actually
that?
killing babies in
What was going on
the
there?
woodsmen's homes? Yeah.
Um, things that were hinted at, we can get more insight on. So
Mhm.
Aragorn alludes to if one has to walk along the Morgul Vale and travel, and we know the Morgul Vale is a very dangerous place.
Oh, yeah.
So seeing the trials and tribulations and what haunts him, because it bothered him talking about that,
Yeah.
seeing that could be
Traumatic.
huge.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's where the landscape and the story can combine, and you'd be like,
Mhm.
that a lot of body language can play credence in that scene where it's like, wow, I see that it's just
Yeah.
like sort of how Frodo wasn't talking a
Mhm.
lot in a sense.
No.
Well, he was, but a lot was body language, the ring bothering him, and not that Aragorn has that burden, but the place is haunting, very much like when Beren went through Nandangortheb.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
he he was beaten down, he was gray, he was bowed.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when Aragorn, which I'm not sure how this would play in, but Aragorn talks to about the Gandalf about going through Moria, and they both been through Moria, but they clearly had two different experiences.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Very different.
Aragorn was like, I don't ever want to go back through there.
Yeah.
No, no. He was
And
like,
who
no, it
knows
was
what he experienced when
yeah.
he was there, but that's a blank that they can fill in,
They could,
and it could be a really good story.
maybe he
So,
had to travel through there to get to the side
yeah.
over.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot they could do.
And did
So
he
even
follow him into Mordor itself? I mean, we could maybe have, a moment where he's chased through Cirith Ungol by Shelob. I mean, there's so many things that can happen that aren't explicitly told to us in the text, but they're not explicitly,
not
impossible to have
Not there.
happened.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, because when you do adaptations, nobody expects a letter for letter, word for word transliteration of text onto screen. That's terrible. That it isn't going to work. And even Tolkien knew that, right? He understands that an adaptation is going to be different, but how different, right? The letter that he wrote to Forrest Ackerman about the Zimmerman script. The canons of narrative art cannot be wholly different. So he acknowledges they can be different, but how different can they be? Okay, so nobody wants a literal word for word translation onto the screen, but we do want to see that where something is said, you don't show something that's exactly the opposite. That's impossible to have happened, right?
This is what we paid
If you
for.
have it conflict, filling in the gaps is fine. Conflicting with known lore, that's where I think a lot of fans kind of draw the line.
We lose it a little bit.
I don't think we're going to have a problem with that with this team. I don't think, given the love that they had, I mean, yes, we can point to the Hobbit films and said they did that
I
a
was about to
thousand
say, I
times.
don't know.
I mean,
They're an outlier. We call them an outlier.
I don't want to make excuses for Jackson and his team, but I know that they never expected to have to fill in, and step in for Del Toro. And then Jackson had a ton of health issues. I think he was hospitalized. But I remember hearing just some of the behind the scenes stuff that he was literally writing the next day's shots the day before they were being shot. I mean, there was not enough time to pre-viz, to storyboard, to do the work before shooting. that they did for the Lord of the Rings. That won't be the case here. They're not going to be dropped into a project halfway. They're going to have the time to do it right, and I think that gives me the hope that it'll be more Lord of the Rings than Hobbit.
Yeah, I hear you.
You know, because the minute I see a big giant gold dwarf statue, I'm out. That's
The one thing I'm looking forward to with this project the most is the call. And by the call, I mean Sauron summons to
yes,
Gollum. He's not specifically like, hey, Gollum, come here. But
no,
he's putting out a call to all evil things to come, and
hmm
Gollum gets caught up in it. And this is how he ends up in Mordor. He was
yeah,
going after Bilbo,
yeah. He
and
still
he was
wanted
just
the
like,
ring. Yeah,
and he went, I would love to see something driving him, like pulling him toward Mordor, and that
yeah.
would be awesome. So we
And
do we
maybe
do
a
have some
scene with
stuff.
him and Shelob sort of setting up the alliance that we then see bearing fruit in the Lord of the Rings. You know,
And
because
Shelob
obviously there
clearly
was a
can talk.
pre-existing relationship between the two of them.
Shelob
Um,
clearly must be able to talk
oh
because
yeah, or at
yeah,
least can understand speech, right?
Yeah,
they
some
had
sort of way of
an agreement.
communicating. Yeah.
And
She
that's
let
the
him
thing. I
go, and
mean,
they had an
it's like
agreement.
the
He didn't
Balrog.
just
The Balrog doesn't speak, but the Balrog understands speech. He knows full
yeah
well what Gandalf is saying, but he doesn't
yeah.
particularly have speech anymore. And we know that because actually in that same letter I mentioned, which was letter 210, he actually says that the Balrog does not speak. And that in the script, Zimmerman has him speak, and he's like, or laugh. I think he has like an evil laugh. And Tolkien's like, he definitely doesn't do that. That letter, man, if you want to get an inside scoop in how Tolkien looked at adaptations, read letter 210 in the collected letters of Tolkien. It's fantastic.
So this is a project where I'm not particularly looking forward to it, but I think we may be pleasantly surprised,
I think
hopefully.
so.
So that I will
Yeah.
subscribe to, and I think that's a very good possibility. We're in good hands
Mhm.
here, and so I'm excited about that.
I am
The
as well.
story itself, I'm kind of like, that I could
That's the
have
thing.
had something different, but
Yeah.
I trust what they're going to do with what they have.
I do as well. I trust the team, and I'm actually looking forward as much to Circus as a director as I am to him as an actor.
Oh, I know that his Gollum is going to be crazy,
Yeah.
and I know with his projects, what he's been doing, I know his directing is going to be off the charts.
Yeah,
So
I think it will
I'm
be.
very much looking forward to that. So we'll see
Same.
how the combination of those four
Mhm.
minds come together. We've seen it before, but
Yeah.
people were in different roles. Now we'll see how Andy Serkis kind of at the helm, and with the
Yeah.
powers that be behind him. We'll
It's
see
going to
how
be
it
good.
goes.
I think so.
Now, well, I know we have one other piece of media
Okay.
coming out. Now, this one, I'm hands in the air. I don't know
You
nothing
got
about it.
nothing.
I'm not playing it. It is what it is. But it does look fun for people who play those type of games. Callie, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the cozy little Hobbit Shire based game that sort of looks a little bit Stardew Valley-ish.
Yeah.
Called Tales. Is it Tales of the Shire
Tales
or
of the Shire.
Tales
Yeah,
of
it
the
sort of looks
Shire?
like an Animal Crossing / Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
It
Do
looks
some
like it's going to
fishing.
be fantastic. Very good atmosphere. It's very promising. I mean, in fairness, it will be compared in our minds to the most recent Middle Earth games, which means Gollum, the disaster that was Gollum.
Hey, the Mines of Moria was excellent.
Mines of Moria was
Oh, yeah.
middling. I'd give it a
Man,
6
I
and a half. I
liked
didn't
it.
think it
I
was that
liked
great.
it.
Maybe because I'm more of a solo gamer, and that
Okay.
game really lent
Oh.
itself to
To
but
team.
It's
I'm also
definitely a
not a
group
big
thing. Yeah.
crafting survival is not my genre, so I'll confess that that's not in my sweet spot. Whereas Gollum would have been had it actually been a good game, and it was a terrible,
Trash.
absolute, utter disaster.
One of the worst games I've ever played in my
I feel
life.
so badly for the guys behind it because clearly there was some passion in the team. They sent me a little pre-release. I was on there here, get a preview of it, because they wanted me to do something on it. And the little box of goodies they sent me included a little pouch that included a little fish, looked like a little fish skeleton and a tooth, and basically all the little things that Gollum says are in his pocket.
Yeah.
And you're like,
That's dope.
clearly they know the lore. There's so much passion, but somehow
I was
it did not
defending
translate
before
into
it
the
came
actual
out,
game.
and I got an early copy before it came out.
Yeah, same.
I'm defending it tooth and nail. Opposite of what I was doing for the movie we just talked about, The Hunt for
Yeah,
Gollum.
yeah.
I was like, I can see a Gollum game because he's so well traveled. We get to see these areas, and I can see a game, but you got to do it the right way. And they just
Yeah, and they
did
didn't do
not.
it the right way. It
They didn't
was a
nail it.
disaster.
Literally a
But
bunch of
let's talk
nothing.
about the good one, right? We could bash Gollum all day. That's a whole episode in itself. Tales of the Shire looks really good. I'm encouraged. The team behind it has been engaged with the Tolkien community on social media, and they seem to really love what they're doing. They seem to really have a passion for the lore. And I love just this idea of taking the coziest part of Middle Earth and turning it into a cozy game.
Yeah, I think that
It fits so perfectly. I mean, it's a natural. So, could it still be a clunker? Sure, the mechanics could be awful or the whatever. But in terms of atmosphere and mood and setting, it's spot on, and I'm looking forward to it. Even though that's not a genre I play a lot of. I mean, I have played some Stardew, but
I play zero genre.
Yeah.
I play that zero. I have no
I'm a
dog in this
turn-based.
fight.
I'm an old school turn-based strategy guy. I've been
Okay.
playing video games
I
since
don't
I
play
was
turn-based games either.
long time
I'm
ago.
a more of a, let's get it. Let's run into battle, fighting.
Everything
shooting,
has
whatever
to
it
be
is.
shooting at him all at once for him
Okay.
to be
Let's
like,
let's just
I'm
get it
here.
popping right
Yeah.
now.
So you want like Doom set in Middle Earth.
It's something like that, But I think this is where we could possibly get Callie to talk, because Callie
Yeah.
plays these type of games.
Good.
This is your time to shine.
It's your wheelhouse.
because
Shine,
Callie is
Callie,
so busy.
shine.
Callie's so busy like running things and orchestrating things. She's very quiet on here. But Callie, what do you think of this game? And I know you're going to get it. Tell us how you feel about the game, because I have no dog in this fight. I don't play those type of games. I'm not going to play this game. I'm not even going to lie to you. I'm not going
Oh,
to
come
play
on! You got to at least try. You got to play just because
those
it's
type
Middle
of
Earth.
games. No, I
Oh,
refuse.
man.
I don't like
All
those
right.
type of games. I don't want nothing to do with it. I don't want to go fishing. I'll be
Well,
like,
when I play the game and do a live stream on today's Tolkien Times, I at least expect you to watch and see if it's any good. Listen
for
to
you,
what we say.
anything, my friend.
All
For
right,
you,
thank you, buddy.
There you
So
go.
All right,
Callie, what do you
Callie,
think? Because I know
tell us about it.
Callie does do. She's into these type of things, and I typically I'll call her and laugh at her and be like, "What are you, nerd?" And I hang up on her, and then But
Dude,
tell
I'm
us-
sorry.
tell us how you feel.
There is nobody in the world that you get the right to call nerd. I mean, pot, kettle, pot, dude. Come on.
But no, I'm looking forward to the game. I think it'll be a different vibe, which is nice. I think a lot of people, especially, not to bring up horrible things, but since the pandemic, people have gotten back into the gardening and the nature and
Yeah.
back to the earth sort of sentiment feel. And I think that will, play along nicely with that. And the whole idea that Tolkien, to me anyway, this is probably a loaded thing to say at the end of an episode, but Tolkien to me is not about the wars and the battles and the big things. It's about the characters and the stories and the relationships. And I hope that this game will focus more on that than the big things that blow
Yeah.
up and go boom in your
Well,
face.
and I think the whole thing, we've got to look back at right now in the Prancing Pony podcast. I'm doing the Scouring of the Shire with Sean. I'm recording those. They're not out yet. But that reminds us, the whole point for Frodo to do this whole quest was to save the Shire.
To save the Shire.
And the Shire is worth saving. And we come back to see the Scouring of the Shire, and we see what's been happening. And then, it reminds us of the importance of home. It reminds us of the importance of the environment, the trees. I mean, this chapter is the perfect time as you're looking through all the destruction of the trees and things to remind yourself of how Tolkien felt about trees and nature and beauty and these places of pastoral quiet and peace.
Mhm.
So it's a perfect fit, really. I mean, that's the Arcadia of the Shire, right? That's that peaceful, beautiful, quiet place that is worth protecting and saving. It's why the Rangers do what they do for so long without credit, without any sort of nods or thanks from anybody. Like Aragorn says, I'm called I'm called Strider by some fat man who lives within an hour's ride of foes that would freeze his blood. And yeah, he gets no thanks, but they do it because it's a place worth protecting. And I hope that sense carries into the game. And I think, Callie, that you're right. It's going to be the kind of thing that, gives us that sense. and reminds us that it isn't just
Maybe it
about
may even
fights.
change my heart, and I may go fishing, and I may go to the market, and
Look,
you
when
know,
all of us have a cooperative farm together, you're gonna want to be on the farm with us. That's what
He's
we're
going to be
gonna
out
do.
fighting. If there's a combat element, he'll fight.
if there's some
Okay,
kind
well, you
of
can protect the
throwing
farm.
tomatoes, throwing apples at people, I'm like, yeah.
I
So
do hope that's
Be
part
like
of it,
Ted
throwing
Sandyman over
apples.
there, you know.
That'd be
I
great.
think it looks great, and I think
Yeah.
the niche is where it needs to be, and I think
Yeah.
I think it's gonna do well. I think it's gonna
Mhm.
be awesome, and I think it fits. I think it
Yeah.
fits, and that calm is awesome for people who like that type of thing. I
Mhm.
really appreciate it, and I know people who are really into those type of farming comfort games,
Yeah.
things like that. So I think it's gonna do well, and that's
I
one
do
of the
too.
things that I'm looking forward to. So I
Yep.
think we're in a good place. It's a great time to be a Tolkien fan. And with all the projects that we coming out, like Merry Christmas to us. Like it
Seriously.
is we're gonna have stuff to talk about for ages to come.
Yeah.
We're gonna have that be able. I know Comic-Con is gonna be huge because
Mhm.
so many things are coming out, and like how could you
Yeah.
not? There's gonna be a lot to do. So I think it's just a great time to be a Tolkien creator, a Tolkien enthusiast, a Tolkien fan. Just it's we're literally rewatching Rings of Power. So I'm excited with all the things. Alan, thank you so much for
Thank you.
participating on our podcast. This is
My
huge.
privilege.
I'm gonna we really gotta push this. We gotta use his name, and we gotta ring some bells here. And we gotta be like, we had Alan. So make sure you come join Voices of Arda. Like, share, comment,
Yep.
subscribe.
Definitely. And I'll be putting this, of course, on our feeds as well.
Thank you so much.
It feels weird to have you say that I'm the most famous guest you've had. I can't possibly agree with that, but I do appreciate it. Your words are very kind, and I thank
I'm
you
not
for them.
slighting anybody else we've had, but you're the upper echelon right now. You're the upper echelon. So I'm very
All right.
I'm very humbled and thank you so much. You're such a kind sir, a great person, man, and I
Thank you.
really love your work and you're awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Callie. As always, love you dearly. Thank you for all you do because none of this would be possible. Once again, I make sure I reiterate this every so often. None of this would be possible without Callie because she schedules everything. She gets the topics together. I am just a voice, but she does all the work. And I really appreciate you. And you are the backbone of our community that we have. Thank you so much. You are very much appreciated. You are awesome, and we love you. Thank you very much. So
Thank you, New Bennett. It's of
Thank you
course a
guys for having
pleasure
me.
to work with you every time. You're so engaging, and the people love to hear your takes on things. Not only the take, but how you present the take is always
Yeah,
very entertaining. It's awesome.
definitely.
It's great, and I love working with you. Do you have a question for Alan before we go? If Alan
yes, I
has a
do.
moment.
So
Okay.
All right.
Alan, before we get out of here, I have a question I ask all of our guests.
Sure.
And you're going to give me 3 answers. So the first question is going to be if you could marry anyone from the Lord of the Rings entire universe, who would you marry? If you could have anyone protect you out of the Lord of the Rings universe, who would you have protect you? And if you could fight somebody from the Lord of the Rings universe, who would you fight?
Let me start with protection. If I'm going to be protected by anybody in Middle Earth, I'm going to go with my man Finrod Felagund. He is just unreal, and the fact that he was willing to fight that werewolf with his bare hands, to protect Beren and honor his oath, there's nobody better.
He's a good guy, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough call because, Glorfindel's not a bad choice. There are some other pretty amazing
There are some
choices out
heavy
there,
hitters, but
but I'm going to go Finrod. Fights.
who do you want to just punch in the mouth? Like
The mouth of Sauron. I mean,
Okay.
I know I'm one of those people who gripes and moans every single time I see Aragorn lop his head off because he is a king and he's talking to an ambassador under a flag of not truce, but under a
Yeah.
parlay. You would never, ever, ever,
Never
ever,
do
ever
that.
million times do that.
Yeah.
But I still roar with cheers every time because the mouth of Sauron is a right bastard and deserves it.
Yeah.
And I would fight him.
That's a great answer.
I've been married for 32 years, so answering this question, that's why I delayed it. So like, this presumes an awful lot. And the one thing, though, and I think it is probably safe to say my wife won't be watching the episode, so I can say this. God, it's tough because, man, Eowyn just is on fire. But Oh, goodness. Yeah, I mean that's the problem is Faramir is my favorite character in the Legendarium, so it's impossible for me not to identify with him a little bit,
Yeah.
and therefore say Eowyn. I almost feel like saying Luthien is like shooting above my pay grade, and like you're kidding me, right? I don't even, and
This is a
I don't
purely
want Thingol
theoretical
as a
exercise,
father-in-law.
though.
I'd have like
Yeah,
the worst
that's-
father-in-law in the world, and he'd be too tall anyway. I can't, what am I gonna do? Build a house that's got 10-foot ceilings, I guess. And at least I'd listen to my mother-in-law because I mean everybody should listen
Which
to
is
Millie.
key.
But yeah, but Eowyn, yeah, she's tough, she's strong, she's just an amazing character. I mean, she's gone through so much, she's experienced so much loss.
Yeah.
But she's refused to fall into those stereotypes. She just rejects all of that. She's Dernhelm and Eowyn.
Yeah.
She's badass. Yeah.
I'm not going to be
Eowyn.
some maiden that needs help.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
I don't need to be a white knight coming in.
A bird in a
She
cage.
stood against the Witch King. If you read the chapters, we were reading those.
Oh yeah.
Men were ducking and crying, and she stood and fought the Witch King of England. Man, that goes without saying that
she's got
phenomenal.
more courage than just about anybody else in the books. Yeah.
She's awesome. So
Fair
before
point.
we get out of here, Callie
Yeah.
is going to hit us with some self-care tips, and
All
then
right.
we're going to let you go. So Callie,
Good.
drop that knowledge.
All right. So this week, the self-care tips are 5 tips for writing an adaptation.
Okay.
So tip number 1 would be the magic 3. So film is unique in its demand for 3 vital ingredients: a clear central character, a character goal, and obstacles. So this is what gives your film focus and direction. Tip number 2 is to find the deep structure. So identify 10 key moments that make up the story. Tip number 3 is when you're doing film, you're showing, not telling. Film needs to be immediate, and it has to give the watcher exactly what they need to know without necessarily having that exposition talking in the background. Tip number 4 is cut. Length of a film is dictated by the capacity of the human bladder. So if you were doing an adaptation, you have to find ways to make it fit into a certain amount of minutes. And that usually means you have to cut. And when you do that, you might find that your narrative changes significantly. Tip number 5, remember, that's a book, this is a film. So a lot of times you'll hear people saying like the TV or the film wasn't as good as the book, but as a screenwriter, you have to accept that's neither right nor wrong. One is not better than the other. They are just different because they have to be.
Yeah.
That was excellent. As
Different
always.
media. Yeah.
Different mediums. Yeah. So
Yeah, and I'd even say that film is different from TV too. I mean, writing a 2 or 3 hour story that's self-encapsulated is a whole different ballgame than writing for episodic television.
very, very true.
Yeah.
So these are
Which is
things
different
that
from writing for a video game.
Yeah.
I mean, it's yeah.
these are
good
things
stuff,
that
Callie.
we all
Good
have
stuff.
to learn and become better with, and then I think we'll enjoy all 3 of those mediums much more if we take those self-care tips and we take them to heart and we
Exactly.
learn from them. So that is
100%.
our episode today. Our wonderful guest, Alice Stowe, thank you so much.
Thank
We
you for having
appreciate
me. It was a real pleasure. I enjoyed it. I'm glad we could do this.
All right. So that is it for Voices of Arda today, and we will see you very soon with the very next episode. Peace, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.